Once upon a time, in a shining city filled with glass towers and luxury cars, there lived a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. His name was Ethan, a successful businessman, a millionaire who had built his empire from scratch. People saw his fancy suits, his expensive watches, and his grand mansion, but no one saw the loneliness that lingered behind his eyes. He had learned to smile at parties and shake hands at meetings, but when the lights went out and the world fell silent, his heart echoed with emptiness. He had dated women who loved his wealth, who adored his fame, and who were drawn to the power his name carried. But each relationship ended the same way, with disappointment. No one ever looked at Ethan as a person. They saw the money, not the man. Slowly, he stopped believing in love, in kindness, in people. His heart turned cold, wrapped in layers of pride and pain. He told himself that emotions were weaknesses, and that loneliness was the price of success. One ordinary morning, Ethan sat in his office, staring out the window of his skyscraper. He was reviewing a new contract when something outside caught his eye. A woman was standing on a narrow scaffold, cleaning the huge glass windows of his building. The morning sun reflected off the glass, and for a moment, the sight looked almost magical. She moved with care and focus, her hair tied back, her hands rough but steady. Ethan watched as she smiled faintly while wiping the glass, humming softly to herself. He was surprised, not by her presence, but by that gentle smile. The next day, he saw her again, this time working in the rain. Most people would complain, but she didn't. She simply kept cleaning, drops of water running down her face, yet her eyes stayed calm and full of peace. Something about her struck him deeply. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a strange curiosity about someone who wasn't part of his business world. Later that week, while walking through the lobby, he noticed her again, packing up her cleaning tools. Impulsively, he approached her. "Excuse me," he said. "I've seen you working on the windows. You always seem peaceful, even in bad weather." She looked up, a little surprised. "Well, sir, the weather doesn't change my job," she said kindly. "I just do what I can, one window at a time." Her name was Lena, and she was a single mother. Her husband had left years ago, leaving her to raise her little boy alone. She worked multiple jobs, cleaning offices, windows, and houses, just to give her son a good life. Yet, despite her struggles, she had an aura of grace. Ethan asked if she ever got tired, and she smiled again. "Of course, but my son keeps me going. He's my reason to get up every morning." Something inside Ethan shifted that day. He had spent years surrounded by people who pretended to care, and here was a woman who had every reason to complain, yet she chose gratitude instead. He couldn't stop thinking about her words, her sincerity. A few days later, he found out which company she worked for. Quietly, he arranged for her to clean his private home's windows. When she arrived, she was surprised to see him again. "You live here?" she asked, looking at the massive house. Ethan nodded awkwardly. "Yes, but it's just quiet." As she cleaned, Ethan found himself talking more than he had in years. She didn't flatter him, didn't ask about his business, didn't care about his money. She just listened. When he offered her tea, she accepted politely and sat with him in the garden for a few minutes. Her stories were simple but full of heart, about her son's dreams, her daily struggles, and how she still believed good people existed in the world. For Ethan, it was like breathing fresh air after years in a closed room. He started looking forward to the days she came by. He even began visiting the local park where she took her son after work. There, he saw how gentle and loving she was, always putting her child's happiness first, even when she had little for herself. One evening, her son, Tommy, accidentally kicked his ball into the pond. Ethan, who had been sitting nearby, jumped up, rolled his sleeves, and fetched it out with a stick. Tommy laughed and said, "You're funny, mister." Lena chuckled, and for the first time in a very long time, Ethan laughed too, a real laugh, not the forced kind he gave at business events. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself changing. He started noticing the little things in life, the smell of rain, the sound of laughter, the warmth of sunlight on his skin. He realized that Lena's kindness was melting the cold walls around his heart. It wasn't about romance at first. It was about connection, about feeling seen, about realizing that money could never replace genuine warmth. One day, when Lena came to work, Ethan noticed she looked worried. He asked what was wrong, and she hesitated before admitting that her son was sick, and she couldn't afford his medicine. Without thinking, Ethan offered help, but she shook her head. "I can't take your money, sir. I'll manage somehow. I just needed to talk to someone." Her refusal surprised him. Most people he knew would have grabbed the offer without hesitation. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lena and her little boy. The next morning, he went to her home, not as a rich man trying to help, but as a friend. He brought groceries and medicine, leaving them at her door anonymously. When she later found out it was him, she didn't get angry or embarrassed. She simply said, "Thank you. Not for the help, but for caring." Her words touched him more deeply than anything he'd heard in years. He began visiting them more often, helping Tommy with his homework, sharing dinners, and laughing together like a small family. The walls of his mansion no longer felt so empty. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from her small apartment balcony, Lena said softly, "You know, I used to think people with money didn't feel pain. But you're different. You listen. You care." Ethan looked at her and smiled. "I used to think love was a business deal. That it was something you could buy. But you've shown me it's something you give, without expecting anything in return." Their bond grew stronger with time. Ethan didn't try to change her, and she didn't try to impress him. It was a pure, honest connection born out of kindness and understanding. For the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere, not in a mansion, not in a company boardroom, but in the warmth of a simple home where love was real. Months later, as Tommy's birthday approached, Ethan helped organize a small party. There were no fancy decorations, no expensive gifts, just laughter, homemade food, and genuine happiness. As they sang, "Happy Birthday," Ethan realized that this was what life was supposed to feel like. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Ethan stood by the window and whispered to himself, "I thought my heart was made of stone. But she melted it, not with beauty, not with money, but with kindness." Years passed, and Ethan and Lena built a life together, not a fairy tale, but a real one. They faced challenges, shared tears, and celebrated small victories. Ethan continued his business, but he also started a charity for single mothers, inspired by Lena's strength. He often said in interviews, "It wasn't success that changed me. It was a woman who cleaned windows and taught me how to see life clearly." In the end, love didn't come to Ethan wrapped in diamonds or luxury cars. It came through kindness, a small, humble act that turned into a lifetime of meaning. And as he looked back, he realized that true wealth wasn't measured by what you have, but by how deeply you can love. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the simplest souls. And sometimes, it takes a single mother's kindness to melt a millionaire's cold heart.